I am just so excited to have you too, because your work is really amazing. So, what inspired you to start I Am Perspective?
So, Jo'rell and I have been friends for a really long time, 20 years. And about 3 years ago, when Black Lives Matters was a topic that was really, prominent, we were having a lot of conversations with each other. And I'm a Bengali Muslim woman, he's a Black man, and sharing perspectives and what that looks like in terms of creating empathy and more understanding. Even though we've been friends for 20 years, until we've started having these conversations, really getting a better idea of how we think, right? And so, one day,
one day. If you guys didn't know, I'm the head nod person. This is the creator. I'm just here. No. What Nussy said, we've been friends forever, and we were talking about how does a situation look like to somebody that you know. We knew each other for 15 years at that time. And not only has she not known things about my Black experience, but there were things that I hadn't known about her woman Bengali Muslim experience. And when we started really diving into what friendship looked like, it's like how are you friends culturally, cross-culturally, and not really seeing those perspectives. So we talked about it a lot. Excuse me. We talked about it between ourselves and what that looked like. And Nussy kind of started the fire one day. Was like, "Hey, let's do this."
I was like, "Why are we just talking to each other? We got it. Okay, now what?"
It really was one of those moments of like, okay. And I think a lot of us do that. We'll talk and we'll iron it out. And does it make sense? And I probably would have done that maybe longer. But that was what was great about the dynamics of us starting. I had a partner who was like, okay, well, let's bring some other people into the conversation. And that's really how I Am Perspective started.
When we started, we didn't have this whole vision of even where we were going. We really just wanted to bring people in safe spaces to have conversations around their experience, right? We all have one. We all have perspectives. So.
Yeah, for sure. You guys known each other for 20 years, and you already touched on who you are. And not only as an identifying things as like a woman, man, race. Beyond that, how do you identify yourself? Who are you?
I'm here, man. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. I'm here. I'm Black. That's what I would say. I'm a Black man. I'm from Queens, New York. That is my bio stuff. But as I'm seeing now, it's like I am someone who is amongst this human collective. And in my individual, I write poetry, I teach, I do I Am Perspective. But really at the end of this, I'm just like here trying to make this thing better. That's my alien answer. I am here.
Besides race, gender, religion, and all of that, a New Yorker, right, born and raised. I think I've always been involved in some level of activism since a young age. So even understanding the human experience has always been something that's been a desire for me. So I want to say someone that's just interested in people, right, and connecting people. A change agent, I will call myself. A lot of things. We're people. We do a lot of things. I think even with I Am Perspective, I think sometimes like it seems like it's so serious, and we're not always so serious. I'm definitely not always. I know, right? And so.
And mind you, this is current for whoever sees this, and we look at all like happy, like this is spring 2009 or something. Everything is happening. This is 2020, and we are very affected, both of us, by it. But we do find a space to be joyful in this quarter. We're doing the work, or what we would consider the work, but the work can't be done begrudgingly. It can't be done with the weight of the world. I just thought about that as we're kind of like laughing along and everything. But, sometimes you get to laugh, even amidst us trying to figure out problems or issues and stuff.
I love that. Yeah, joy is such an important piece right now. And just like you mentioned, it is not 2009. It is 2020 today, and June 5th. So a lot has been going on last couple of days, and in 2020 just period. global pandemic of COVID-19, and now the Black Lives Matter movement again rising up, and not only United States, but it's a global movement. And today is Breonna Taylor's birthday. What possibilities do you see in this current climate of the world? What is the possibility we get to create?
I think this might be one of the best times to be alive. As crazy as that sounds, there's been times where the entire world was at war, like at war, annihilation kind of stuff. And this is a thing that we're facing is a war. It's a different kind of war, but this is something that we don't actually have to fight and lose people for. If we do this in a unified way, like this is something we could solve without any kind of bloodshed. So as crazy as this sounds, to be like, this is a great time. I think enough people are paying attention. Enough people want to not only listen to Black Lives and Black Lives Matter, but also share how they feel. Because there's going to be a lot of listening at first, a lot of sympathy. We're experiencing this rouge of sympathy, which is good because a feeling is a feeling. Before, people weren't feeling anything.
Yeah.
But we want to change that.
It's a catalyst for change, right? Like, it's unfortunate what's happening out there, but I do think what we've been trying to create all along is safe spaces for dialogues and conversation, because we think that, you have to have real, genuine human connection and empathy for others to want to be better, right? There's people out there who are, even now, maybe they had a conversation before. Maybe if they had met someone before and had a more open conversation, they would understand things better. And so here we are. We've been hosting all these conversations, doing the work, and not necessarily seeing, we've had our loyal supporters, you've been one of them, right? Now we see insurgents, like people really want to talk now. Like, we're actually like, our events now, we're like, wait, we have to limit people. We never had to have that conversation of what a limitation would be. Now it's like, wait, what's too many people in a chat room and a conversation? So it's a good thing in that kind of way, like that people are open to it.
And these things were here. These things were here. This kind of racism that people are kind of just like, oh, okay, I see it. They were here for a long time. So there's many things to discuss. I think this is the best time. We were actually just taking a walk, to be very honest. And we were like, this, not to sound cynical, but like, what other time could we do this? It would have to be a way worse catastrophe. It would have to be some epic catastrophe to bring us all to attention to one thing. Mm-hmm. And the virus has been epic. It's over 100,000 people who have lost their lives. People are still dying. We just got off a call about somebody who passed on Sunday from the virus. So that's still an active thing. But amongst all of that, there's so much unity happening. There's so many conversations.
There's hope.
Yeah. And when we started Iron Perspective, it really was at the end of the day, before we really kicked it off, we were like, who cares about a conversation? What's a conversation? What's a room full of 6 people, 15 people talking? What's that going to do? In New York City, mind you. We built this in New York City, in the heart of New York City, where like nobody stops for 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing companies, we're seeing families, individuals really seeking that out now. How do we have a conversation, even if it's 8 people, 15 people? So.
And first, I want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. First, I want to say that there are so many people who lost their life. And in the midst of that, we get to support each other and through listening, right? Mm-hmm. Listening is such an important thing that we don't do very well, especially the New Yorkers or people in general. We are like always wanting to comment something, wanting to say something relevant, even from they're coming from the good place. So creating the empathetic conversation beyond sympathy, like how do you think we can build more listening skills?
I think an important distinction is not just listening skills, but how we speak about our experiences in the first place. In our dialogue events, one of our main rules is like, you share your experience with the intention of others getting it, right? So how do you express yourself so that the other person is receptive to hearing and possibly learning from you? So we create safe spaces, and one of our distinctions is no debates. We're not here to debate. We're not, when you think you're gonna have to go back and forth and argue with someone, you're already like defensive in your mind, right? And that takes away from listening.
When most people come to conversation, they come with guns loaded. They come with all the ammunition of everything they know. All of my facts, all the people I listen to, Fox News, CNN, wherever I get my information. And it's really not a dialogue is a dance. It's emotion. And we just kind of pile our thoughts on to people without listening to what you just mentioned. And as Nussy said, we create a space where it's a very small, fine point thing, but like we take that away. We take that idea away of it. Somebody's representing everything. You don't have to represent anything, and people kind of humbly just fall into it. I'm like, well, really, this is just how I feel. I don't have to represent all of Black people.
You don't have to have that responsibility of holding the burden of any group, right? I think taking that away, you're only responsible for yourself and your own, perspective. So.
Right. Because we've done that. Mind you, we're not perfect. We go through squabbles.
We have our own separate. It's not like we have the same brain.
Yeah. No, we have intense conversations about perspective, and we perfected it in a way to present it to people who have no kind of concept of it. Everyone knows this word. We recognize this. We hear it a lot. So people are familiar with it, but I don't know if people are really diving into what that means. How important it is for someone's perspective to matter. You go your personal journey, like I happen to know your journey, right? And it's like I couldn't be really that invested in it without sitting with you and seeing your perspective. If I was kind of passively being like, oh wow, you went through, that's crazy. And it's this feeling, and then I can move on, but seeing it from your perspective and then vice versa, we can have a different understanding.
Like empathy, right? Like actually sitting across from you. It's different now that we're doing things virtually, but one of our other distinctions is like genuine human connection, right? So how often were we sitting in front of someone and actually looking them in the eyes as we're having this discussion? When you're hearing it from someone and actually seeing into their soul and like actually hearing them, like it's a different feeling. Like you can't just dismiss it. Like, oh, okay, they just said that, right? And so it does look a little bit differently now for us. We have been doing it virtually.
But we're going to get back out to the real world eventually, right? And I'm excited because this time has brought all of us together on this Zoom life. And we talk about it like, man, what's this going to look like if all of this has to happen for another year, say, right? People don't want to hear that, right? Let's just say the rest of the year, right? And most of our content is building through these forms. We're going to have to get used to communicating and unifying, but when we get out and get to see each other and get to look at each other, all of these things we're doing now, they're really going to hit different.
I mean, the one good thing about doing things virtually is that we're no longer limited by where you live.
Right.
We have people from all over the country, all over the world join us, which gives us actually more flexibility of how things look, right? Timing. A lot of times, based on the location, people aren't necessarily able to go over there, having to find a physical space. So it's really an opportunity for us to explore different ways of reaching even more people.
Love that, taking out the limitation of like a physical space, like to see it as a benefit and connecting with the people globally. I want to ask a question about the defensiveness that we talked about and the responsibility, because for someone who are not in the space and so used to talking about we or overall perspective, it is a scary topic to bring that personal perspective, I would imagine. They may not even aware of their personal perspective because they're so used to their own and without being attacked, right? Without feeling being attacked. And I remember one of the first I Am Perspective event series, like you guys mentioned, we trying to create the safe space for everyone to come in, including white folks, without feeling really attacked. It was a really impactful thing for me to hear that. Now that everything is on Zoom, now that global change is happening, how has the demographic, how has the people perspective have shifted, or have you seen anything in that people's journey, including yourself? What your personal perspective journey has been?
Oh man, my perspective is that more people need this. At first, I was like, this is important for what we're doing. I think we both knew it was like a big thing, but my perspective now is that these words that we built this on matter so much more. Empathy, perspective. That's the core of a lot of things. Before we get legislations, before we get people voted in, before all of that, we're really gonna have to understand each other. We're living amongst each other, and that we care. You know, that most people care.
My personal perspective on this journey is, as you mentioned, in the beginning there was definitely more reluctance for a white person to step into the room, or certain groups in general to step into the room because they weren't sure what that would look like. They're used to maybe having to defend themselves, right? Being on defensive. And so now, actually, this past event that we had on Sunday was probably the most diverse, most amount of white people we've ever had in an event, right? And that's really just showing that, you know, for so long, Black and brown people and minorities have had some level of uncomfortableness in their life. They know how it is to be uncomfortable. And when you don't have to be uncomfortable, we kind of want to avoid being uncomfortable, right? And so now we're in this space where it's like, it's over. That bubble is over. It's uncomfortable. So are you going to deal with it, or are you not going to deal with it?
It's uncomfortable.
And it's uncomfortable for everybody right now. Absolutely. So I think that takes away like that layer of like, all right, well, it's happening now. And more people are open, right? Like now, I think we've also created a brand and a statement that how many conversations have we had? 60 conversations. No one's killed anyone. No one's hurt anyone. People are actually leaving and learning something about themselves and other people. So
again, this is in New York. This is not like, no, I'm not gonna say that about anywhere else, but New York City, where everyone has an opinion, everybody has something. In all of our events, we've never had any arguments. Not because people are peaceful and we got a bunch of monks in there. We had real people. We've had emotions. We've had tears, but we recognize that a space really can be created to have any type of conversation, from Black mental health to the LGBTQ perspective to the immigrant perspective to, you know, we've had so many different diverse conversations, and it's been the same result. It's been somebody walking away like, wow, I didn't know that.
I think also, as you're just naming some of the topics that we have covered so many different perspectives that I think even in that, it shows that there's a level of mattering, that there are so many different ways of mattering, right? Whether it's through your race, gender, religion, or even your occupation, your social class, right? And so I think sometimes people think of it being a one type thing, a race and gender, and it's so fixed to that, and it's not. There's so many different ways of expression of really getting to know people.
And I want to also add, you know, like I hesitate to say some things, but like I want people to also think about when you open yourself to doing what like you're called to do or whatever. I don't think Nussy and I had this in mind at all. You know, we both have our individual kind of collective idea of why we started it.
Yeah.
But I started it because I really wanted a lot of perspective shift on my culture and how we're viewed and how our experience in America is understood. And that's still at the core of it and my truth, what I want. But what this did, it allowed us to really operate on such a more global level of like, this matters and everything does matter. Like all lives do matter, but we do have to we have to give everyone a perspective and share it and get it back, you know? And it's allowed us to have all these different conversations. I didn't start this to have an immigrant perspective conversation. I wasn't against it, you know, and I think a lot of people will do this in our world, in our country. They'll be like, you know, I like that. I'm not against it, but I wouldn't particularly think to have it. And so when we did have that conversation, man, I'm learned. Nussy and I are learning from each conversation. We walk away with something like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And it grows us, it grows our experience, it grows how we run this company and what our,
you know, the fact that you said we didn't know that, we don't know everything. I
thought I was in trouble. Like she got a push. She like, you know what you
no, but seriously, like we don't know everything. We don't have all the answers. Right. So a lot of people have been reaching out to us. And yes, we have some answers. We do know some things, but we don't have all the answers. And that's another, you know, when we come into a room, we're not forcing our perspective and opinions on others, right? You really have the space to accept and not accept what you want to. So it's a learning space.
I love that. It's a learning space. Speaking about learning space, what was the biggest learning you ever learned through 60 plus or 50 plus events that you have done so far? What is the biggest learning that you've discovered?
You could go at it.
That, like, everybody, man, I be trying to be so rosy. Everybody's messed up. Every single one of us, you go, hear me. Every one of us, every single state that we've had, not messed up, I don't mean that, but like we all have some background story, we all have some traumas, we all have unconscious bias that harbor with us. Nussy and I have had to extract them continuously. But, we walked out of events that had like sessions, and like I didn't like that. I didn't like that person in a lot. We've had to deal with that. Like we all are dealing with something. Sometimes I think we forget that we'll look at somebody and they have this and they have that, and wow.
I think we forget sometimes because we do this work so often that we have so many conversations that there are a lot of people who really don't have the space to have a conversation, an open, honest conversation with anyone in their life. And so time and time again, I think we're grateful with all the people who come and tell us like, oh wow, for the first time I feel heard and understood. And so like really checking into that and like what that has meant over the years.
And the status doesn't mean anything. We've had people that we knew that have nothing, nearly homeless, have that experience. We've had millionaires in the room with businesses, and they're really the top of their stuff and say the same kind of thing. We're all messed up in a good way. If we're all messed up, then it's all good, right? But but like
we all have more to learn. That's what he means.
There you go.
Everybody gets to when in the room. Everybody sees it in a beautiful way, though. Of like, wow, your messed up looks like mine. Man, that's beautiful. Wow, it's not that messed up. It's just something that happened in your life. Look, I had something that happened in my life. Look, this is my experience. Wow, I didn't know that. Look, this is my experience. And the conversation is a different build, as opposed to, blah, 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 this is me, this is how I feel. And you kind of fake listen to somebody and they do the same thing. And you call it a conversation. Sometimes that's necessary. People like to spar. People like to do that, and that's cool. There's the internet for that. But for people who want to have real conversations, we've created a space that allows that.
I love that, the space for a real conversation to happen. So I want to ask one question. This is a very exciting one for me to ask. With that all being said, with all the work that you're doing, what is the world that you would like to see?
I mean, world peace is always at the end of all of this, but really humanity, right? Where people are actually like at the pinnacle of everything that we're doing is that everybody matters, right? That everyone has something to offer and something to learn from, right? And what does that look like to get past our outer, things that hold us back from getting along? Like I want my vision for the world, right, is that not that we don't see color, right, but that it doesn't matter what color it is, right? Like that it's really just another part of us that we can all really learn how to get along. Like what does it mean to get along even when we don't agree on things, even when we disagree, right? So I'm not looking for everybody to be on the same page and everyone to have the same exact perspective as I am.
Yeah, along that. Once you say world peace, it's like, what else? What else could I really want after that?
World peace.
I want to see us working toward it. At least, if world peace is out of the range, if that's out of the mind, I see what's happening now. Man, I've always believed that things happen instantly. Change is instant. It seems like years and years and years of buildup, but once it changes, look, we're not going back to kind of anything normal or what we thought was normal 5 months ago, right? And that was instant. So in this time and what's to come in the years to come, whatever it looks like of people conversing, I see it just cafes and all these places in our neighborhood. We're already together. We're already living amongst each other, not just in New York and all these states around the country. You know, I want to see what we're doing reach all these places, be multiplied, and have places and neighborhoods where people can sit down and converse and build community together. Because we're not going anywhere. My American is as much as yours, is as much as hers. You know, and that's a reality. No matter how I want to feel about it, what my ancestors did right now, we're all here. And how, you know, I'd love to see us all working towards and learning each other and making this thing better. Because we can do it.
Right? We can totally do it.
We really can. We can do it.
Yeah, I asked that question because something's been really coming up for me is, yes, we are fighting against police brutality. We're fighting against racism. We're fighting against XYZ. But when we focus on what we are fighting against, like I also want people to remember what we are fighting for beyond that. When we beat that, whatever it is we are fighting against, then what are we creating? Like, I want people to remember that, because when we're constantly fighting against something, that creates tension, that creates hate and anger, and it comes from like hurt place. So I want, like, my vision is always like, what are we fighting for? Right? It is important to identify what we are fighting against.
Yes.
So that we can beat it.
Yeah.
But what's after that? Right?
Yeah. Our appeal back behind it is humanity. I don't think anybody can fight with humanity, no matter what race you are. We can make these issues a humanity issue. And right now we have to talk about race because race is what it is. And we have to find a way to deal with it. But if we could start seeing this, if the Asian community, if the Black community, the white, all these different communities can start seeing these things as human issues, it'll be a different investment in it, you know. And then once we tackle this, because this is a very, very big, complex, and important issue, but there's so many more issues amongst our American society that we're going to need everybody on deck for, you know. And it can't be just, and I think Black people understand that, of like, it's not just like, hey, everybody focus on us, help us out, let us get better, and then, you know, we're here. And it's going to be this, the woman's, I'm not going to say it in order, like this is what's next, but there's so many other issues that I am perspective infrastructure is going to be necessary for.
Absolutely. Nussy, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
just humanity.
I love that. Yeah. And guys, what you're doing with I Am Perspective is really allowing us as a human to be a human one more time, and embracing and learning about not only each other, but really ourselves. I also want to share that the first time I spoke up in I Am Perspective, I realized how much voice I have as an Asian immigrant female artist. And so I really want to thank you for that experience. Like, it has impacted me in a level that people don't understand.
And thank you. You've been there. Of course, you were there when you were the only Asian. I think you were there another time where we had maybe 3 or 4, and Nussy being Asian as well. We're having that conversation of what even that looks like now. Of what does the Asian, again, for what I just said. This is beyond Black Lives Matter, though Black Lives certainly matters and is important and is our focal point of a lot of things. But what does that look like in the Asian community? You know,
we all have to talk at the end of the day, right? There are certain communities that are not used to talking or not used to even acknowledging feelings, to even be aware of where their bias or their, is coming from in the first place. And, you and I have had this conversation before. How do we get more Asian in the room, right? Because you and I, we float in circles that don't have too many people that look like us. How do we get them in the room? And that's been a big struggle. And I think it's still a little bit of a struggle, but I think there are more people who are willing now, right? There are certain different communities that are willing to have this conversation. Just a few days ago, we recorded an episode in more of a Bengali perspective. I'm planning on having a whole Bengali perspective conversation. And I think now is the time, maybe, 2 years ago they were not ready, but now is the time that they are ready, right? Definitely needs to have some conversation in the Asian community in general over everything that's been happening. and their role on both sides of the spectrum, really. So.
And we talk about perspective. If I could add on to one of the things I learned most, which was really like a day ago, I learned. We were interviewing Nussy's cousins. They're Bengali, and he was speaking about the generational experience of trauma from whatever war or whatever trauma that might be carried over from the country that you might be coming from, and all of that is baked into. When I say trauma, I'm talking about all of us. You know, I don't think there's anybody in the country walking around who's just trauma free.
I mean, if you weren't traumatized before, you definitely are after COVID.
Right.
So
at the very least, the last couple of months, put something in your life, you know. But it's also a space that we created that you don't have to come in and feel, again, the burden of all of that. Like you're not the attack piece. I think a lot of white people don't come to the events because they end up being the punching bag for the entire culture that doesn't really show up to, you know, Black and brown and minority events like that. Yeah. Like, we're always talking.
Yeah. I actually want, you know, besides just talking, something that we are looking to get more into is, before we didn't want to introduce information that would sway someone another way or not before the conversations, right? Just keep it authentic. But now we do see more of a need for us to actually educate people on history. I'm a history major. What that really looks like. I think that's a component that has been missing for certain communities, right? So for the Asian communities, for the Bengali communities, there's a lack of understanding in history of what it actually, you know, the only history you learn if you did go to school here, and that's if you did go to school here, is whatever they taught us in those history books. And that really was not very much, right? Including, you know, Black history, Native American history. And so what is the real history? Why are people really upset and angry? I think there's a level of understanding that different immigrant communities do not have, and they get to learn about, as they also share and discover perspectives for themselves, right? Each community has different things that they're dealing with, even in this whole race conversation, even everything that's happening in our country and in our world, right? And where they stand and where they lie and what their responsibilities
are. Absolutely.
That's something that we are incorporating more into.
Oh, that you guys are starting to incorporate more education part. And so what else what's coming up for I Am Perspective?
Well, right now we're really focused on the word that came up earlier, which was unconscious bias. And we recognize that not only from the events that we've done, but from the personal development that both Nussy and I have done in our personal lives, from the place that we come from the most diverse place in the world, Queens, and our experience as a Bengali woman and a Black man, we recognize that a lot of what blocks us from empathy is our bias. And we've taken a lot of time and research to put together workshops, personal workshops for your person or your family or yourself or your spouse, as well as corporate packages of unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias and then diversity training, right? We have our own method of using conversation and dialogue to really create a better workspace. You know, besides just doing the work for the community, which has looked many different ways for us, right? We have our signature dialogue events, but we also have our own radio show. We have I Am Perspective Radio, where we have an opportunity to get even deeper into some topics based on our guests that we have featured. You know, that has definitely changed over time based on what's going on. We are, you know, I kind of almost feel like we're kind of like journalists in a way, in the way that we cover certain topics, because it has to be relevant to what's going on now or what people really need to know. We also have I Am Protected, which was our philanthropic initiative that was started at the beginning of COVID. Besides just being a business, we're really a community first. The strength of our community is that what does it really look like when you connect people and you collaborate, right? And so that's how I Am Perspective, Protected, right? We're really able to help people in the streets, right? Our essential workers and our underprivileged communities, right? So that was done through, you know, handmade masks, hand sanitizers, MetroCard drives, food drives, amongst a variety of other things. So it's not a one, it's like we said, we've grown since the beginning of how we started. But really, at the end of it, empathy, I think, is still empathy and humanity.
Even in the I Am Protected, it's really a community, creating a community of people who are doing the same thing around New York and eventually around the country. People, because this outpour of people making masks and doing things at home, like this has always been within people, and we don't foresee it ending anytime soon. I think that we might be moving into a new wave of that. We want to keep a structure for that, keep a community and build a community. People who are out here who just decided to help and decided to do something. So that was I Am Protected. And, somewhere in between all of that, we're breathing, taking deep breaths, sleeping occasionally.
Sometimes.
You guys get to take care of yourself, so that, right? Like the self-care is so important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're like, let's go take a walk before this.
Thank you for doing that. And how can people learn more about your work?
You can go on our website, www.iamperspective.com. Our Instagram handles is @i.amperspective and then @i.amprotected. And we also have our radio @iap.radio. So we have, a few different sites. You can definitely check us out. Jo'rell is actually also our web guy, and he has a great job. I don't even know what you call it.
People who don't know anything about design, they're like, you're the web guy. Or IT. They point at me like, IT? You're like, sure. That's what I am.
He's done a great job with our website. There are some more updates coming soon. You can also take our free unconscious bias self-assessment. That's also on our website. There's a lot of things, so you can definitely follow us out there.
I love that.
We're on Facebook.
Yeah. Just look us up. We're Googleable. I am Perspective, if you can see. When you jump on our site, we'll have some links for some of these shirts if you're interested in.
Yeah, this Perspective is
yeah, it's really been amazing because we've done this work in some different states, like I said, and now we're seeing people pop up with our shirts on from the West Coast, from down south, and
that's amazing.
Yeah. So join the tribe. We're out here.
Movement, right?
And seriously, we're very, very connected. We're looking for
collaborations.
Right. We're looking for collaborations. We're looking to collaborate. There are some needs that we have, as far as we need like grant writers, we need some assistance and things like that. So if you've heard anything that's interesting to you,
if you want to intern or volunteer for us, we're definitely open to that.
We're building the team up. There's a lot of people interested in working with us. So contact us and let's talk.
I love it. Yeah, thank you for all the ways that people can connect and find you. And I really, before we wrap it up, I really want to thank you both for creating the safe space. Not only the safe space to talk and listen to each other, but also safe space to find ourselves, to learn about ourselves, and to see the possibility of connecting from the empathetic place. So thank you.
Thank you.
For doing that work. And one last question is, what is your call to action for humans on the planet right now?
Let me censor myself first. No, what did we put in the last news?
Basically, just, our call to action, I think, is basically at the essence of I Am Perspective, right? Have a conversation, right? Everyone has a responsibility. It can look different ways during this time, but what does that look like for you? If you don't know something, find out. Join conversations, right? If you do know something, then use that voice to spread that information as well. So either way, don't keep it to yourself. Share.
Yeah, that's it. That's why she's here. Those things. No, I was going to say a word that we put out was grace. A lot of people are crashing into each other right now. Non-Black people, people of color. There, a lot of information is being thrown at the wall, and there's an urgency to pay attention and do what you can. But we also recognize, man, we really all have just come out of a quarantine situation. There's going to be a lot of demand if you are of a different race. When people are like, "Hey, what are you doing? Step up, step up," then that's just going to be the demand, you know. But you get to be graceful with yourself, be active, as Nussy said, want to know more, because this affects us all. It's not just extracurricular work. This is really our home now, and it's important for us to understand what's going on. But have some grace with yourself. Come out when you can. If you can't make every Zoom every single day, it's all right. You know, do what you can. That's what it is.
Do what you can.
Do what you can.
Do what we can. All right. Thank you so much for joining this conversation and being who you are. And we really, really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo.